So how do we move away from a state of desperation, a state of seeking, and instead live in a state of trusting, in a state of acceptance, and in a state of inspiration and being? The reason for the video was I recently put up a social media post, and it was I was doing a talk and I said something in response to somebody, and it was written down and it was made into a Facebook post. And what I'd said was words to the effect of, if you're desperate about something, that will keep you from it. And it created a bit of chatter, and I was asked to do something about that, about alleviating this desperation, because sometimes when we're trying to do something or achieve something or realize something, and, we've been banging our head against the wall for a while, we have some sort of understanding, but we're not quite there. It can create quite a desperation. And that desperation compounds itself, and it just gets heavier and heavier. So what would normally take moments then takes that a little bit longer. Our very knowing of a subject or having some sort of success, but not reaching the Holy Land, so to speak, creates this desperation. And how to alleviate it, because the mind is then stuck in this loop and it's whirring away and it's trying to understand something. And what the mind will then do is hear things about, say, for example, the topic of realization, and will dissect it and try to find meaning where there is no meaning, or try to find hidden meaning where, in fact, the statement is quite open, and will generally see more than is actually there, which will then further compound the problem. So what I want to do is kind of like just literally talk a bit about my experiences, talk more about living from a place of inspiration and what that can do for you, and how trusting and accepting what's going on can sometimes help us dissipate this desperation and see ourselves for what we truly are. I want to start with a story that I've been telling recently. It was about my experiences at my last talk in Europe. And I'd flown in to Slovenia. I was doing a weekend intensive. And I asked the organizer how many people were going to be at the talk. And the organizer looked at me and literally was, I don't know. And I remember this complete panic just overtaking me. And I thought, great, you've just got on a plane, got to the other side of Europe, paid your airfare, and you could be sitting there with about one person this weekend, or maybe no one's going to show up. So there was this complete panic, and I thought, oh, okay. And as soon as there was this panic, a thought came into my head of like, well, you're just going to have to trust that it's going to be okay. And what was really interesting was over the course of the weekend, people did show up. The talk was full. People brought along food. There was this absolutely lovely banana bread brought along on a Saturday morning. So what happened was all of these little moments came together in this absolutely perfect talk. So by the end of the weekend, I'm sitting there in the venue, and I'm sitting there loading my thoughts, and I thought to myself, you need to start trusting more. Now, prior to this thought, what happened was, for the last year and a half, I hadn't really been putting out any new content. There was content coming out, but I didn't feel it really kind of encapsulated what I was trying to say. And what I found was there was this process in play whereby what I've been talking about was changing as well. So I'd started talking more about feeling emotions fully, more about gratitude, and I felt I was taking another direction altogether. And it was disconcerting as well, because there's one point where there's no content coming out, and then there's content coming out, but it's not what I thought it was going to be. And there were a few times when I thought to myself, well, then maybe that's me and I'm done. What I've found recently is just over a couple of months period that the world went into lockdown, and I kind of went the opposite way. In other words, I started getting busier. More people started showing up. I started having more conversations. I can't begin to tell the amount of times I'll be walking down the street and I'll just randomly end up in a conversation with somebody about this, or the fact that I'm now looking to organize more meetings and get out there, and how quickly a group has formed. And what was really interesting was, as this process was working itself out, I found that everything started becoming that little bit easier. And I became that little bit more trusting and that little bit more accepting about situations, whereas I can be quite impatient, and I can be one of those people who really wants, things to happen, and they need to happen right now. What I've found is, as that sense of ease has just taken root, the sense of desperation of trying to make this work, or trying to organize talks and trying to go up and down the country and things like that, which is what I was doing at the beginning, the need for all of that has just kind of died. And I find I talk less, and yet more people listen. I do less, and yet more is being achieved. And I suppose what happened was by being fully in that desperation, something happened, and the idea was dropped. And sometimes what we find is that desperation, that triangle, that being or trying to do something, is what keeps us from the goal. And it's whether we can just kind of trust enough to let that go. Life takes care. I remember Rumi once saying that when his days were, when he was trying and being and trying to do something, his days were full of stress. And yet when he let go, everything used to just seem to fall into place. And it's whether we can let go of the idea of trying to do something and trying to make things right, because I think if I had a pound for every time I've tried to make things right, I think I'd be rich. Or if I had to give a pound, I'd probably be bankrupt now as well. It's like, can we let go of trying to understand something? Can we let go of trying to control it or trying to make sense of it? It's a hard lesson, because it basically means we then have to trust, and we're so conditioned. And the idea of the I and me and the individual is so reinforced in us, and the idea of doing is so ingrained into our psyche, that what I'm proposing sounds quite counterintuitive. To, in a sense, let go. Somebody asked me the question. We were talking, and it was like, so what are you saying? I should just go back to life and stop going to these talks? Well, yes, why not? If it's not working, why not? Walk away. But sometimes that can be the hardest thing in the world to do, because we are approaching our seeking, we are approaching our lives with the idea of trying to do, and yet life shows us, if we were just to stop, that life can take care. Some impossible things have happened over the last couple of years, and I would absolutely love to claim them and lay claim to them and say, well, because guess what, my chakras are at a certain vibration that this has happened, and nothing could be further from the truth. Sometimes we just need to let go of trying to understand, or trying to be, or trying to do. And what can happen is that creates that space where understanding can happen, where we can live from a much more empowered, trusting and accepting place. And that creates a patience, which then allows us to stop and really look. And that's where we find our greatest inspirations. That's where we find our greatest art. And that art can be obscured sometimes with this whole idea of trying to do. That the mind is saying to you that we need to understand this topic, we need to have an awakening, we need an event such as realization. And until that event hasn't taken place, that life is somehow incomplete. Is the thought even true? Have we ever sat with these ideas that we have about realization and actually try to examine whether they're real or not? Because there is, as I've said in previous video, a lot of misinformation around this whole idea of living openly, of living from an inspired place. I believe inspiration is our true home, but I believe for us to live from this space of inspiration, we do have to let go of our preconceived ideas of what this thing is, what reality is. And we do have to take that leap of faith, knowing that we'll be absolutely fine, which is trusting, which can bring up agitation, can bring up emotions. And then if it does, we should sit with those emotions as opposed to turning away. So everything that's being said is actually intuitive, but because of the way we have been conditioned and what have you, sounds counterintuitive. So it's about going against our conditioned intuitive responses, that emotions are bad, we need to suppress them. Trusting is something that just the hippies do, but, I'm too busy to because I've got bills to pay. Or accepting that life is always going to work out, but no, I'm the captain of my own ship because the idea of an individual has been reinforced. constantly. And that individuality has caused this idea of separation, which is now, as we can see, being further and further reinforced. And we're being pulled more and more apart and defending our spaces. And separation can only lead to more and more separation. So the reminder is that you're not this separate person, but at the same time, separation within it has the seeds of this oneness. And if we can stop and we can go against our conditioned responses of trying to figure something out, we can find we're living from a much more inspired place. The desperation can drop because we are always trying to do. And that trying to do inevitably leads to a very inefficient and very time-consuming and energy-wasting way of living. The amount of people I meet trying to suppress their emotions or trying to suppress their thoughts, it's allow it to come out. Sometimes it's going to be great and sometimes it's going to be completely ugly, and that's absolutely fine. But what we can find is, when we allow that, expansion and contraction to occur in our lives naturally, as natural as breathing, we'll find that this natural way of being that we are supposedly looking for, that we feel is somewhere outside ourselves and that will be, found at the feet of the master, or, at the end of the pointer, or in a practice, it is actually who we actually are. And it's about reconnecting, realizing that there is really no reconnection, and just accepting that whatever's happening right now is it. And as we sit fully with whatever emotion or whatever thought is coming up, it can then leave because it serves a purpose. Everything is efficient. It serves a purpose. What then happens is we start seeing more and more what we are. And the agitation, the desperation, or the need to know can die, because there is no need to know this, because you are already this. It's like asking who you are, knowing that you know who you are. So it's about dropping these little barriers, these little stories that we have in place. And as we take this load off, what we find is we're freer, we're more open. And agitation, pain, stress, and desperation to try and make sense of this all can just disappear.